Hi guys, and welcome to Boxing Ring Sight, the brand new insight, information, talking point and chatter channel on YouTube for the latest boxing news from around the world. I'll do my best to keep you all updated. If you can hit the subscribe button, we need to get our followers up. We are brand new. I had a channel before, that's gone now, so this one needs to be back up there where the other one used to be. So please hit the subscribe button, I would appreciate it very much. Okay. Let's jump right in. There's been a lot going on in boxing recently, and I mean a lot, and most of it is outside of the ring, actually. We're talking boxing politics. Now, a few years ago, boxing wasn't in the healthy state that it is today, and in the last 5 years, and 5 or 10 years, it's really accelerated in growth. It's a growing market, and people are heavily investing in boxing. One of the most significant turning points, I think, has to be noted as the Eddie Hearn and DAZN deal, which when it was announced really shook up the world of boxing because, then as a ripple effect on everybody else. DAZN wanted to come in and change the game. Historically, boxing has been shown on a linear TV schedule, on a TV network, so there'll be a time and it'll either be pay-per-view or it'll be a subscription service. DAZN don't operate like that. With DAZN, you pay a monthly fee, one low monthly fee, I think it's $9.99 or something, and you basically get to see any fight that they put on their shows, which is great for the fans, but not so good for the TV networks that are broadcasting their sports, specifically their boxing sports, to their fans, because they charge pay-per-view. Primarily, that is the biggest earner is pay-per-view, and when you've got stars like Canelo Alvarez and Anthony Joshua on the DAZN platform, then obviously you're not paying pay-per-view prices to watch them. It's really disrupted the market. Now, as a knock-on effect of that, you have seen some major changes. One of the biggest and saddest was the loss of HBO, which has been long established with some high-quality boxing, which has been broadcast around the world. And it was sad to see HBO go, but they decided that it was not worth the investment from a financial point of view, and they had other things that they need to concentrate on, and so they went a different way, and they said goodbye to boxing, certainly for now. However, others have upped the game. So, recent news, hot off the press, Tyson Fury just signs a $100 million agreement for exclusive rights to his fights between a party of 2 different promotional companies and 2 different broadcasting networks, one in the UK and one in the USA. So, for that $100 million, ESPN, one of the biggest broadcasters for sports in America, has basically said they will use their affiliated promotional company, Bob Arum and Top Rank Sports, to promote Tyson Fury on the American side of things. And in the UK, there's Frank Warren of Queensberry Promotions, and he will represent Tyson Fury in the UK alongside the broadcasting partner in the UK, which is BT Sports. So that's fantastic for Tyson Fury, but more to the point, going back to what I was saying, this is a huge sort of fight back from the big networks who are basically saying, right, well, if DAZN have got Anthony Joshua and Canelo, then we need our big headline act. And so they've signed Tyson Fury. And then you're also seeing investment coming in other ways as well. One of the most unsure and sort of up in the air at the moment, because they haven't really played the hand, is Showtime, who are, at the moment, heavily linked with Al Heyman and his PBC, Premier Boxing Champions stable. They don't really have a massive name. Now, it was thought that Deontay Wilder was their heavyweight fighter under PBC, but a day after the announcement that Tyson Fury was on ESPN, I think Deontay Wilder thought to himself, I am not tying myself to anybody at the moment. I'm going to go where the money is. So I'm not going to say that I'm tied to Showtime or Al Heyman. I'm going to come out and say, look, I'm here. Whoever's got the most money, come and get me. So that puts Showtime and Al Heyman in a little bit of a position where they're going to have to show the hand, or they're going to have to make a move one way or the other, because ESPN have now got Tyson Fury. DAZN have got Joshua and Alvarez, just to name a couple. I mean, they've made some significant signings. The fight that they're putting on June the 1st is between Anthony Joshua and Jarrell Miller, who is also signed to DAZN. Eddie Hearn's Matchroom Sports also has a 1-month rolling contract, a 1-fight rolling contract currently with Dillian Whyte, who you could arguably say is the best of the rest. Dillian Whyte had a fight with Anthony Joshua for a title a couple of years back, and he lost by knockout. But since then, he's gone on an unbeaten streak and is considered by many to be a very dangerous heavyweight, and he is ranked number 1, but he's not mandatory because Dominic Breazeale has been holding on to that mandatory spot for quite a while, and the poor guy just can't seem to get a date. But what I want to talk about is the impact on Eddie Hearn and Sky Sports, primarily Sky Sports in the UK. I think for the last, I don't know, since the beginning of the AJ story, let's say, since the beginning of the journey between Sky Sports and Matchroom Sports, specifically under Eddie Hearn, the revival of boxing, which started in the UK, everything seemed very glitz and glamour. Everything was very polished. It went so smoothly. They rarely had a bad night. They rarely had a hair out of place. Everything was almost choreographed to perfection. So when a fight was coming up, Eddie would get in front of the cameras, and he'd give interviews, and everything would be polite and correct. The interviewer would ask the right question, Eddie would give the right answer. They'd do round the table, face-off, blah, blah, blah. And the fighters that were coming to fight AJ were mainly respectful and went along with it. And so they got in the ring, and when they get the chance to fight each other, they have a fight, and obviously AJ would win. So that was while Eddie Hearn was primarily focused at that time with Sky Sports in the UK, all right? But the revival was magnificent because you had huge fights in the UK. You had Carl Froch against George Groves, which was a sellout crowd in Wembley, the rematch anyway. You had the likes of Anthony Crolla, which was a massive draw in the UK. You've got the likes of, obviously, Anthony Joshua, who was making his journey. And that's just to name a few. I mean, the Matchroom stable was pretty significant, and it still is today. But is it a Matchroom stable anymore? There's a bit of a grey area, because it's no longer Matchroom and Sky Sports, or Eddie Hearn and Sky Sports. When Eddie decided to accept that contract from DAZN and move into the American market, he quadrupled his work rate, all right? He just took on so much more than he was used to dealing with. And by the way, I think so far he's doing a fantastic job. I'd love to know how that man sleeps at night, because it seems to me he's either always on a plane, or he's always on an interview, or it just doesn't look like he has time to sleep. I'd love to know how many hours he gets a night, all right? He's just all over the place. And they've expanded so much. They've got shows now in Italy, in Spain, America, the UK. They went into women's boxing, so they've got massive stars like Katie Taylor. And they're just so huge, and it's just getting so big. But are we finally, at the moment, starting to see the first cracks appear in the mammoth that is Eddie Hearn's Matchroom Sports? When they signed the deal with DAZN, they really went all out, and that's when they captured, you know, the likes of Canelo Alvarez, and even to the staff, they put exclusivity, a contract of exclusivity on Michael Buffer, the voice of boxing. Let's get ready to rumble. He is now under the Matchroom contract, so he only announces fights on Matchroom and DAZN cards. But this is what I'm trying to say. They're trying to corner the market. They're trying to explode in America. DAZN, obviously, their business interests dictate that they want to be the number one sports broadcaster in the United States, and they've hired Eddie Hearn and Matchroom Sports to do this. But I'm just starting to think that maybe the first cracks are beginning to emerge for such a huge effort. Eddie Hearn in the UK was praised for putting on, absolutely amazing fights, huge spectacles, Wembley Stadium, the Cardiff Arena, which is the Millennium Stadium in Cardiff, massive stadium, Manchester Arena, the O2, these were massive stadiums or places which were sold out on a near regular basis. I mean, every fight was near enough sold out. And even the fights that weren't on pay-per-view, many of them, he put cards on Sky Sports, which, although a lot of them were controversial, and you're always going to get people that are naysayers, and, they say, oh, it's a crap card or whatever. Generally, you got a little bit of value for money, and there were some cracking fights on Sky Sports under Eddie Hearn. But since the focus has shifted into DAZN and the United States, I think Sky Sports are now starting to feel like they're not getting the value of money that they think they deserve, because, a bigger boy has come along and said, well, hey, Sky Sports are in the UK, but we want you in America, and we want your biggest and best stars in America. And so this opens up a dilemma, and you've almost got a conflict of interest, because you want to keep your American big boys happy, which are the new players in the game, but don't forget, they give you a lot of money to do a job which they want you to do, and do it now and do it fast. They're a growing network, and they need your focus, your time, and your support to nurture this seed into a tree. But then you've got the old wife at home, who is Sky Sports, and they're saying, hey, we've been married for a long time, don't you go cheating on me. Don't forget where your loyalty lies, because, if you take your eye off the ball too much, we might just go out on the town and look for ourselves somebody else. Put together the fact that BT Sport, and more specifically BT Sport Boxing, has entered the UK market, and they've done a deal with Frank Warren and basically got their own fighters now. So they even took some of the fighters from Eddie Hearn. So they took Josh Warrington, when I think Eddie Hearn thought that he was a spent entity, and they turned him into a world champion, beating Carl Frampton most recently. And now he's a big pay-per-view star. They've got Tyson Fury in the UK. They've got a whole host of different fighters which are starting to rival the might of Sky Sports in the UK. But this is where the cracks are starting to appear, because now he's just announced his first American show for Anthony Joshua, which is his biggest attraction, his biggest star, and he's been getting pressured from DAZN. When are we going to get AJ in America? When are we going to get him fighting on DAZN? We need this to go fast. There's other people making their moves. We need to capture the market. We need to give people value for money. We want AJ. We want AJ. And I think with the pressure of the Deontay Wilder negotiations for Anthony Joshua, and the Tyson Fury fallout after the Fury-Wilder fight, how his stock rose, it really put Eddie and AJ in this position from number one almost to number three. And I know that is just, it's not statistically correct. AJ is still the proud owner of the 4 belts, but he isn't the proud owner of the public opinion title. And I think a lot of the general public and boxing fans around the world don't consider AJ to be the number one boxer in the world in the heavyweight division anymore. I think they think Tyson Fury is. And I think they're also questioning the deal between Eddie Hearn and Deontay Wilder. What was offered, what wasn't offered. So where did it go wrong? Where did it start to go wrong for Eddie? Well, I'm tempted to say the DAZN deal was a bit too much. He bit off more than he could chew. But, if it makes money, it makes sense. So that has to be taken into consideration. But I think one of the worst moves Eddie Hearn made was trying to intimidate Deontay Wilder into fighting AJ, basically trying to get him to come with his cap in his hand, begging for scraps, all right? And the deal that was proposed it just wasn't what Wilder's team was willing to accept, and it wasn't what Wilder was willing to accept. And they held out. And I don't think Eddie was prepared for that. I don't think that he thought they were going to hold out. I think he thought they were going to accept his offer with open arms. And, they never. And so they protracted it more, and it went from a negotiation into a saga, and it really gripped the hearts and minds of the boxing world. So you got fans starting to mount pressure. Hey, when's AJ going to fight Wilder? Well, we're negotiating. All right, well, you've been saying that for the past 2 months. What's happening with the negotiations? And then I think Shelley Finkel pulls his trump card, and he thinks, you know what, Eddie Hearn, you are Barry's son. You're not on my level. You're not in my age or my experience. I'm not taking orders from a kid, all right? And I think he just walked away from the deal. And he said, you know what? If that's all you're going to offer, then shove it up your ass, basically. And I think Eddie started to realise at the last minute he'd made a big mistake. And he probably should have been a little bit more accommodating to Wilder's team's requests and how much he was going to pay them. Instead of trying to get all the small details all in AJ's favour, which is fine, he's doing a job for his fighter, but he's also, he's also protecting his own interests and lining his own pockets. But I think when he just, he gambled on the Wilder thing, and when it didn't happen, he thought, well, who's Wilder going to fight? If he hasn't got us, he hasn't got anybody. Little did he know that Tyson Fury was around the corner. And at the time, Eddie Hearn, he couldn't have even imagined that Tyson Fury would accept the fight, never mind fight. He said on a number of occasions in interviews leading up to the fight between Fury and Wilder, this fight isn't going to happen, this fight isn't going to happen. Eddie Hearn truly believed the fight wasn't going to happen. So when he was in negotiations with Wilder, he didn't even think the Wilder-Fury fight was a thing that was even possible. But it was the biggest, the worst decision he could have made, because the Wilder-Fury fight just took the rug from Anthony Joshua's feet, and it put him in the corner, and it put them in the spotlight, which is exactly what happened. Now, if the fight went any other way than the way it did, which was a controversial draw, many thought Tyson Fury won the fight. I thought he did too. But a controversial draw was the outcome, and the 12th round was one of the most dramatic rounds in boxing, and it really just propelled Tyson Fury in America. His stock soared, absolutely went through the roof. And what this did is it put AJ and Eddie Hearn into a backward position. So they took steps backwards instead of steps forwards. And then you could smell the desperateness, that you could smell the desperation, should I say. The interviews that he was given on social media platforms, on YouTube, for example. Oh, well, we're open to discuss terms with Wilder. We're here. Talk to us. And he wasn't getting any response, because you had your chance. You think you're the big boy. You think you're coming over to America. You've got all this money with DAZN, and you think you're just going to come over here and treat us with such disrespect and expect us to thank you for it. Well, no, it's not going to happen. So I think that was his first bad move, all right? And I think he's starting to see now, many steps after, that it was a bad move. So the domino effect from him not being able to fight Wilder means he has to look elsewhere. So then he looks at Fury. But again, he's a businessman, Eddie Hearn, and he's a shrewd man, but he's also very proud, and I think his pride gets in the way sometimes. He wasn't willing to let Tyson Fury, who has no belts, but he is considered the lineal champion of the world, but still, he has no belts, and Eddie just could not see it in himself to say, right, we'll take a 50-50. It was always going to be 60-40 or more. And then you had Dillian Whyte, who is his own fighter. He's under a contract for Matchroom for at least his next fight. He couldn't even come to a deal with Dillian Whyte because he wouldn't open the purse strings. And he said, no, Joshua's the champion. We're only going to pay you what we want to pay you. If you don't want it, then bugger off. But I think there's an ulterior motive there. Remember, DAZN putting the pressure on. Now, what Anthony Joshua wanted is probably irrelevant at this point, because you've got a battle between Sky Sports and DAZN. Now, if Sky Sports, if the AJ fight with Dillian Whyte would have went ahead in Wembley, it would have been prime time in the UK on Sky Sports. So Sky Sports would have made massive revenue from that, and they would have been the big winners. But now, okay, AJ has just announced that he's fighting Jarrell Miller in June in Brooklyn at the Madison Square Garden. And now the revenue is going to be primarily for DAZN. Even though they're going to stream it back to the UK, DAZN is going to be the platform and America is going to be the location. So now Sky Sports are getting a little bit pissed off because there's this announcement from Eddie Hearn that Anthony Joshua is definitely going to be fighting in Wembley and he's going to be fighting in a big stadium fight. And then all of a sudden, well, actually, no, DAZN have got it and we're going to put him in America and we're going to put him out there. And we're now starting to see AJ at the press conference with Miller. He was getting disrespected. He's not used to this, all right? He's not used to this. I know he's had a few mouthy opponents in the past, but he's not used to this level of disrespect. Big Baby Miller came straight in there. He pushed him. You know, he wasn't there to shake hands, or he didn't have any kind words. He called him a bitch. He insulted his mother. He told Eddie Hearn that he was a tight bastard, basically. He said, "You're not going to get any compliance from me. I'm going to say what I want. I'm going to do what I want. You're in my city. You're in my town. I'm going to say whatever I like." And I think that's a completely alien environment for Anthony Joshua, and it's also an alien environment for Eddie Hearn because I think he's very much used to being in charge. Also, take notice when they were at the press conference. Instead of Eddie Hearn pulling all the strings and directing the choreography for how the press conference moved along, you also saw Anthony Joshua starting for the first time to take over and to actually butt in and cut Eddie off. And Eddie was trying to move it along and end the questions from the press who were at the event. And Anthony Joshua was saying, no, we're going to stay a bit longer. It's all right, don't worry about it. Let him speak. And it was quite bizarre because I think Eddie Hearn, on more than one occasion, at least 3 or 4 times, said, right, this is the last question. And AJ said, no, it's not, keep going. To the point where Jarrell Miller just actually said, you know what, I'm done. Got up and walked off. And then AJ was there on his own with the head of DAZN sat next to him, and his trainer at the other side, and Eddie Hearn looking rather awkward on the podium, fielding questions. And then let's get to the questions. The questions themselves. They were very hostile, and they were very anti-Eddie Hearn, and very anti-AJ. And they were saying, oh, well, what happened with the Wilder negotiations? And they weren't very, they weren't very happy to answer it. I think AJ did actually take exception and try to answer it and said, no, let's not hide it, let's talk about it. And you could see Eddie squirm because he didn't want to talk about it. And then afterwards, you had the YouTube guys who were filming, doing interviews, and again they were just being very disrespectful, questioning Hearn. Instead of going along with his line of questioning, they were asking him, awkward questions and stuff that he wasn't keen on. He didn't want to answer. So you're just starting to see now, perhaps, the first cracks emerging in this huge, fairy tale story of Eddie Hearn and Matchroom Sports, which he has inherited. Well, I mean, his dad still owns it and runs it as a director and, the big boss. But his dad's given him the reins of the boxing division. So Eddie Hearn and Matchroom Sport boxing going over to America, is it too much for him? Is the empire starting to crack? Is it going to crumble? These are questions that must be asked because this is how things are at the moment. You could see the pressure is mounting. I think the fight with AJ and Jarrell Miller is going to be a big sellout. I don't think they're going to have any problems there. But are the boxing fans in America going to be so easily impressed by the performance, depending on what the performance is between them two? Are they going to be as impressed as the UK fans are? And is that going to help the DAZN, or is it going to hamper them? And if it doesn't, and if it hampers them, the DAZN going to get frustrated? And is Eddie Hearn going to have to invest more of his time and energy into making it a better platform. And then in turn, our Sky Sports going to say, you're just putting too much time and effort into DAZN. We need you back in the UK. We need